So in a typical talking head segment or video interview, a 3-point lighting setup is generally what's used. Now it's called that because there are 3 points of light. Rocket science, I know. The first light in this setup is the key light. Your key light is the brightest source of light which illuminates your subject. This light is generally placed 45 degrees to the left or the right of your subject. The second light is called the fill light. The fill light's job is to eliminate any of the harsh shadows cast by the key light. The fill light usually has some sort of a modifier to diffuse that harsh light to again negate some of those cast shadows. And the third light in this setup is the hair light or the rim light. This light's job is to separate the subject from the background. And speaking of backgrounds, a very important step in creating this look is to separate your subject from the background. If you notice in my setup, everything is pretty blurry and you can't really see a lot of detail back there, putting me in focus. Now, lighting the background is an option and personal taste. I generally like to light it some sort of a color. The blue tones behind me are a complementary tone to the orange in my skin, so it helps set me apart from the background even more. So I'm currently using lights from around my house to create this studio setup, and I'll walk you through exactly what I did to those lights here in just a second. The most difficult thing about using lights around the home versus studio lights is that lights for your house are purposely designed to diffuse the light in a way that everything around it is illuminated. Studio lights have modifiers and other things that you can attach to them to really create different shapes for the light. So keep that in mind as I walk you through some of the things that I did to create this setup. So here we have a regular old desk lamp that I've gaffed to a light stand. Now I know some of you might not have a light stand, but I could have clipped it to the side of this little cabinet or onto that shelf, just trying to get it at that 45-degree angle from where I was sitting. I've taken a piece of computer paper and I folded it into thirds and taped it to create that diffusion. Without this piece of paper, this light would have been a little too harsh where I was sitting. Now for my background light, to light the actual background of my setting, I've used a desk lamp with a couple thin pieces of blue gel. Now, admittedly, the blue gel isn't something that most people have on hand, but you can buy this stuff online for pretty cheap. And lighting the background is much more of a personal taste, so it's up to you whether or not you want to include it. And so here we have my favorite modified light of the whole setup, my backlight. This is a light that you can find at Home Depot, Lowe's, any hardware store, and I think they're like $6. These lights are extremely cheap. It's just the bulb and then the little housing. I've gone through and modified it with a super expensive modifier that I bought online. It's just paper and gaff tape. The reason I created this little modifier is because when I turned the light on without it, it was lighting my whole scene. I just needed it to point at my shoulder or at my head to separate me from the background. On a professional studio light, you can add what are called barn doors to the front, which control how much light comes in and out from that source. I've done that a little bit here. I've limited the amount of spill that goes from the left or right of this light, creating a little bit more of a focus on where it's aimed. The light was still a little bit too harsh, even with these super expensive barn doors that I added. So I took another piece of paper and just covered the front of it. Another really good tip when setting up your light, studio or home or otherwise, is to start with all the lights off, roll the camera, and turn each light on individually. Sometimes the lights can cast some weird shadows or light some pockets in the background that you don't want lit. So if you turn those on one at a time, you can see which lights are creating those things that you don't want in the shot. So I'm gonna go through the home light setup and the studio light setup, one light at a time to show you what they do and then how they work in conjunction with each other. While most tutorials and talking head videos will be shot with the 3-light setup, I typically tend to lean more towards a 2-light setup. It's a little easier to put the lights up when you're in a pinch, and I also like the more dramatic look that it offers. This is all just a matter of personal preference, so find the look that works for you and go with that. And just to compare the two looks, here is the difference between this home light setup and a studio setup. So my studio light setup is just like my home light setup. Got my fill light lighting the front of my face and my backlight separating me from the background. And I've lit the background blue to separate the orange tones in my skin from that complementary color. So there it is, guys, how to achieve a professional studio look using lights and things around your home. Hope you guys enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you want to see more videos and tutorials like this, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.